This is Keep Up. I'm your host, Cynthia Dill. It's Wednesday, December 31st, 2025. I'm in my Cape Elizabeth studio. Happy New Year. Wrapping up 2025, which I would say was a pretty good year. Certainly chaotic. The Trump chaos on the heels of the COVID chaos. It certainly keeps everybody hopping. I'm grateful to all the listeners. Happy to be here on New Year's Eve. The explosions in the background are fireworks, people celebrating the dawn of a year. And I predict that 2026 is going to be another very exciting adventure. And I look forward to sharing some of my observations about the world, the culture, and politics. Obviously, this gender issue is huge for me because it just really hits home. It's in my view, just one of the biggest sort of women's rights issue of my lifetime. And that's not being melodramatic. Uh, so I'm all in, and the mechanism that will test this issue, the litmus test in Maine, is going to be the referendum question on protecting girls' sports. So that's, I think, everybody. I mean, I'm not claiming to be a genie to predict that that's going to be an issue, because everybody knows it's going to be an issue. But I think what is going to be also, as a backdrop, a very important context is this gender affirming care is finally, I think, being exposed for what it is, which is the biggest medical fraud, in our lifetime. Um, and I think the path to that is this W path, the World Professional Association of W path, Transgender Health. Okay, the World Professional Association of Transgender Health. To me, it sounds just dumb, but I guess it has some heft to some people, apparently, because it convinced the Maine legislature that it is the body of authority on what is appropriate health care for children, and not health care that's being recommended by a physician, I might add. This is affirming whatever a young person says that they want, and I'm not exaggerating about that either. So in Maine, we passed a law in 2024 that made gender affirming care a legally protected right that is also paid for by taxpayers, because if you have a legal right to it and you can't afford it, well, then we write the check. The public writes the check. So in this law that passed in Maine, it says that, it identifies, or it defines rather, gender affirming healthcare as the standards that are promulgated by this um, World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATHS. Okay, WPATHS, it turns out, is like a group. It's basically like a Facebook group. You don't need to be a medical professional to be a member of WPATHS. You could be like a baseball card collector, or maybe a Pokemon card collector, and be a member of WPATHS and have a say in what the standards are for so-called gender affirming care. So this organization that the Maine legislature is relying on in making gender affirming care, which in my view and in the view of a lot of people, uh, is butchery, is abuse of children. It's malpractice to remove healthy breasts of adolescent girls. It's not care to drug and disfigure children uh, because they have a feeling of confusion about their gender. Um, we we went way too far down the road, and the Maine legislature relied on this WPATHS, and this WPATHS had a WPATHS file like gate. Documents were revealed that demonstrate that there is no evidence really whatsoever to support gender affirming care as a good thing for kids. And moreover, the lack of evidence and the lack of cover up, or rather the degree of cover up, is astounding. and frightening and horrifying. And WPATHS has been widely discredited, and gender affirming care for kids in countries, so-called progressive countries like Finland and Sweden, is no longer allowed because they actually have done real research. But in the state of Maine, we have this law uh, that the Democrats pushed through, and I have a feeling that it's going to, um, be determined that this was just. Um, It's just so political. There's no medical basis for gender affirming care, and it's really disgusting that it really starts, like, way at the top, because this gender affirming care that is appearing in laws, like the one in Maine, is actually a product of, Richard, Rachel Levine in the Biden administration, and they're changing things up and, really saturating, um our culture and our laws with this gender ideology. And Rachel Levine, who Richard Levine, Rachel Levine, it was reported, purposely withheld from research, age limits on it was recommended by professionals that there obviously be age limits on surgical and other methods of gender affirming care for kids. And Rachel Richard Levine decided to take that out of the official reports, not because it was in the best interests of the children or their in furtherance of their medical care, but instead because it would be politically better for the position that they were trying to get themselves in, which is to have this, gender affirming care, a right that's paid for by the taxpayers, which is exactly what they achieved, including vulnerable kids who can't possibly give informed consent about the long term consequences of the decisions that they're being not only asked to make, they just, if some kid says literally in an interview with Planned Parenthood that they're having confusion around their gender, they get prescribed puberty blockers without their parents' consent. And that is the gateway drug. That's the beginning of this horrendous path to transition for what? Because some kid has like some confusion. It's crazy. Harming our kids, these girls with these scars. It's just, I get nightmares. If you see the pictures of these butchered chests of young kids and the lies that they have been told. So finally we're getting some clarity on exactly how bad this is. The Health and Human Services report of the Trump administration, however, apparently authored, according to Newsweek, the report out of the Department of Health and Human Services makes the case pretty strongly that there's no basis to engage in interventions on children to the degree that we have been doing, and that it needs to stop immediately. And I fully support those efforts. I fully support those efforts. And I think there's going to be investigations because that's the environment we're in. And I do think in Maine there's going to be some messy. It's going to be a mess, and the Maine Wire is going to probably do the work to uncover the mess and connect all the dots, yada, 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 all the organizations, all under the same umbrella, all sort of shoveling this ideology along. I'm sure there's massive conflicts of interest. So doesn't that sound like a lot of fun for 2026? But I think the good news is that, hey, we made it through the first year of the Trump administration. We can make it through the next year. Uh, there's a light being shown on something that we care deeply about, and that is the protection of our kids from this horrendous gender ideology. There's something hopeful about that. And it's hopeful to know that I'll be sharing some time with you in the upcoming year. I appreciate all the subscribers and listeners to the show. Leave a comment, subscribe, and Happy New Year. I wish you peace, prosperity, good health, and And that's it. This is Cynthia Dill signing off. Take care.